Thank goodness the Calgary Flames have a goaltender, because Tuesday night's game could have been a 10-goal barrage by the Oilers.
You're Locked On Flames, your daily podcast on the Calgary Flames. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to this edition of Locked On Flames, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, now the #1 sports podcast network. Oof City on Tuesday night in Edmonton as the Calgary Flames fall to the Oilers. Talent trumps everything, and it's apparent in the Battle of Alberta, the first of two this week between the Flames and Oilers. What is the distance between those two teams? We'll look at that from a big picture standpoint, and being the holiday season, we'll provide some holiday wish list that we hope to have granted, a holiday wish list that we hope to have granted for the Calgary Flames. I am Ryan G. I am a play-by-play broadcaster based in the Pacific Northwest. Have been a fan of the Sea of Red since Peter Marr got me sucked in a couple of decades ago during that Lightning Flames Stanley Cup final. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. If you want to be right in the middle of the action this season, visit FanDuel.com and place your NFL live bets all season long. Calgary, a 5-1 defeat to Edmonton, and it was a party at the net for Connor McDavid and crew. 39 shots, the 19 for Calgary. The Flames technically had 4 power plays. There were so many penalties by Calgary in that matchup. I'll be honest with you, I didn't even finish the third period in this game. Happened to be out on Tuesday night, so was rewatching it prior to recording this podcast. And the reality of it was there wasn't a lot more of the story to be told in the third period. It looks like Dustin Wolf might have been slightly shaken up. There looks like there was a hefty skirmish at the very end of everything, but the story, the headline, is Connor McDavid extending his point streak to 11 games, 12 goals, and 19 assists in that stretch. It's the 45th time that Connor McDavid's had at least 4 points in a game. That's second now in Oilers history, and it was a 5-1 lead. Power play with 14:22 left. Wow, what an absolute barn burner it was for Edmonton. And Calgary just didn't have an answer. It was one of the first games in a while Calgary, as well as the Flames, have played over the last 10, 15 games. It's been one of the first games in a while that just felt like Calgary was completely outmatched. I mean, from top to bottom, except for one place that we'll get to in a little bit later in the show, which is the fact that Calgary has a tremendous goalie. Dustin Wolf is really him, and we'll talk about what that might look like in terms of positioning Dustin Wolf's prime time with potential young talent as we get later into the show. Leon Draisaitl, though, I think there's nothing that he likes better than playing the Calgary Flames. 9th regular season hat trick for Draisaitl, and cashed in on a whole bunch of opportunities in the matchup. And Connor McDavid was pretty frank talking about the way that his team played. Said, I thought it was as good as it's been, really solid all over. Special teams were great. 5-on-5 generated and didn't give up much. The goalie played well. A lot of things to like. And Edmonton definitely has reason to feel that way. First now in the Pacific Division, 3-way tie atop the standings, and Calgary's possibility of making the postseason just seems like it is farther away than what was already a slim feeling that Calgary had of possibly making the postseason field. The tough part for Calgary Flames fans is the Flames are still so far away from also being a complete bottom feeder team, which hurts their chances to get a top draft pick in the 2026 NHL entry draft. Lottery chances are there. I mean, you can finish in that bottom 10 and still have an opportunity to get that first pick. But at the same time, Calgary just doesn't seem like it's a team that is destined for tanking. And I think when we look at the future of this Calgary Flames team later on in the show, the homestand that finishes out this calendar year will be really a big indicator as to whether or not Calgary is going to the straight bottom of the Western Conference standings. Credit Edmonton. They were 15-1-3 when scoring first coming into that game. They had 9 straight wins, scored the first goal of the matchup to go to 10 straight wins now. And you have 53 points between Draisaitl and McDavid in the last 11 games. That was the Sportsnet broadcaster, Jack Michaels, the voice of Edmonton, pointed that out. And I had to rewind a couple times because like, wait. Did you say 53 points in 11 games? And that's including the game against Calgary. At that point, that was the total that they had. But it makes sense. The Oilers 7-2-1, the last 10 coming into that game, and they'd been averaging 4.5 goals per game, an 18-8 shots advantage for Edmonton early in that game. And it just felt like there was no looking back. Ryan Huska, Kevin Bahl, and Jonathan Huberdeau talked more about the matchup and the tough night in Edmonton to NHL Flames on X.
I don't think that was a very good night for us. I mean, I feel like we gave them way too much room, through the neutral zone in particular for us. And I thought their top players did a really good job, and I don't think we handled them all that well tonight.
A lot more intensity than us, but the keeper was excellent. We got to be a lot better, a lot to learn from there, and if we can shut down their power play, I think we can give ourselves a good shot in that game.
I think they took the lead and never looked back, and I think we feel we couldn't really generate anything on our part. So I mean, kind of go on a break, and we're facing them at home, so I think we got to be ready for that.
That last part of that soundbite from Hubie was very telling. I mean, he sounded like there were no answers for Calgary in that matchup. And of course, if you think of what Jonathan Huberdeau was supposed to be for this Flames team, trying to salvage what they could in the Matthew Tkachuk trade, he was supposed to be a tremendous piece of the offense that was likely going to make Calgary continue to be an actual contender in the postseason, not just a qualifier. And Hubie has not been that in the broad scope of his Calgary Flames career. Certainly wasn't a factor in the matchup against Edmonton. Trying to salvage some bright spots for Calgary. I mean, we had keys to the victory if Calgary were to win the game on Tuesday. Idea of penalty kill prowess, that certainly wasn't there because Edmonton did put it in the back of the net frequently with the extra person on the ice. Did not score first, and there was no production from the backline line. In fact, the only goal for Calgary came from Mackenzie Weegar, and that felt really, really good for the Flames because he finally got one of those long blue line slap shots to go, and then almost immediately I wrote that down. I was like, great, Mackenzie scores, finally gets one of those big slappers to land, and then about 4 milliseconds later he's in the penalty box, ends up tapping the glass, gets tossed for a game misconduct, and then that put Calgary in even a tougher position because they were playing with 5 defensemen the rest of the way. And even when Kevin Bahl dropped the gloves and went into the penalty box, Calgary was basically playing with 2 pairings, and it just got a little bit worse from there. I really wish Connor Zary could make one of those plays one-on-one. Late in the first period, I had a note where Connor gets off to the right side of the net for Edmonton and just didn't win a one-on-one opportunity that's there. And again, we're really honing in on this idea of the difference between the young talent of a lot of teams and that of Calgary. And it showed there where Zary can't win a battle to put something at the net. Matt Coronado had a early shot. I was excited. All right, start throwing it at the net, Matt. 3 or more shots only twice since November 28th for Coronado, and that ended up being his only one. He had 2 more shots that missed the net, but it just wasn't the Flames' night. Edmonton shined the way that the Oilers have shown they can. Even Calgary should feel fortunate, per se, that they got that shootout victory in the opening game of the year before they went on that 8-game skid. And the only real bright spot outside of what we've highlighted for Calgary was certainly Dustin Wolf. I mean, he has been tremendous for the Calgary Flames. 34 saves in this game. Had one amazing stop in the first period on a 2-on-2 with a trailer rush. And really, I'm probably giving Wolf too much credit because Ryan Nugent-Hopkins just hit the post. And then later on, I put it in all bold with 2 exclamation points. There was an all-star reel for Dustin Wolf after the 3 minutes following the Mackenzie Weegar penalty. And I admit that the Calgary Flames have the right guy in net and his teammates and head coach certainly acknowledge that, talking to NHL Flames on X.
The first goal he probably want to have back on the rebound, but other than that, he was really good for us tonight.
He's a couple too many opportunities against, and he was good for sure.
And I think we let their top guys kind of have too much room out there. We know they're unbelievable players, but you can't let them have that easy, I think. And obviously we know they have a really good power play, and we took too many penalties as well.
They are, Hubie, unbelievable players. Calgary doesn't have that kind of young talent, except for maybe in net. And Dustin Wolf is certainly that guy. We'll talk more about the long-term vision for the Calgary Flames, comparing it to what Edmonton has, considering these two teams play again on Saturday, which, if Dustin Wolf is in net, he was kind of shaken up as Edmonton put in its 5th goal of the night. He was kind of shaken up in that third period. If he does play on Saturday, it'll be his 100th NHL game at Scotiabank Saddledome if Calgary has him in net against the Oilers. What is the distance between Edmonton and Calgary? It feels like a chasm right now after that shellacking on Tuesday. We review that when we come back on this episode of Locked On Flames. NFL Sundays move fast, one big play, and suddenly everything feels different. That's what makes live betting with FanDuel so exciting. You're not just watching the game, you're reacting to it in real time. With FanDuel, you can place bets as the action unfolds. Every drive, every momentum swing, every highlight moment. And live betting is the best when the game starts to shift. You might have a receiver that starts to get hot. The defense tightens up, where the momentum flips after a turnover. And FanDuel lets you jump into that moment with player props updating as guys heat up. Who's going to be the next touchdown scorer? You can bet on drive results, totals, and more. It keeps you locked in every snap, every drive. And we are a day away against the Kansas City Chiefs for the Denver Broncos, my team, who are trying to claim the number 1 seed in the AFC. 13.5 points favored for the team that's going to be wearing, inexplicably, white from head to toe, the white helmets for the Broncos. Ugh, not a good look, but maybe a good result. And you can get in on the action as things change throughout the course of those 3 Christmas Day games in the NFL. So if you want to be right in the middle of the action this season, visit FanDuel.com and place your NFL live bets all season long. FanDuel, the game moves fast, and so can you. Thank you so much for making Locked On Flames your first listen of the day, and thank you for making Locked On the #1 sports podcast network. I'm into the middle of my 2nd week in this Locked On Flames chair, so I am so glad that you are here. We're trying to strive for 700 subscribers on YouTube. Continue to please download the podcast and consider joining our Everydayer Club, where you get access to ad-free audio feeds of Locked On Flames through your favorite podcast app. It's compatible with Apple Podcasts or Spotify. And invite to a members-only Locked On Flames Everydayer Club Discord server, where you can talk to us about anything that's going on across the Locked On Podcast Network. So please visit lockedonflames.supercast.com and become an Everydayer Club member today. You can also tap the link in the show notes to learn more. Calgary loses 5-1 to the Edmonton Oilers on Tuesday. What is the gap between the Calgary Flames and the Edmonton Oilers? Like I said, it feels like it is a ravine right now after that game. Jack Michaels, the play-by-play guy for the Edmonton Oilers, said it best on the broadcast. There's just a lack of high-end polish that has cost Calgary in the matchup, specifically the 5-1 game on Tuesday. But there were just no flashes of anyone for the Calgary Flames that feel like they're remotely close to even the 4th or 5th best player right now for the Edmonton Oilers when you look at everything beyond the goal. Credit to Connor Ingram. He's just his 2nd NHL start. He played well against Calgary, but the Flames didn't supply a ton of pressure in that matchup either. I mean, that's a huge component of this conversation, is Calgary only had 19 shots against Edmonton, and that makes things tremendously difficult. It felt like in every moment, Connor McDavid was doing something to make a play, had a breakout on the PK unit on the first power play that Calgary had in the game, and Rasmus Anderson ended up having a slash penalty that put things back to even strength. And Calgary had one of its best chances in that sequence because Michael Backlund, who has been hot, credit this note, first time that Backlund's had multiple goals in back-to-back games, he ended up almost getting another score. Granted, it would have been just his first had it gone in, but it got behind Ingram. Either way, Calgary doesn't end up scoring, and as a result, the Flames are just so far away compared to where Edmonton is. You look at the Oilers having 2 players with 50-plus points in Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl, and then you have 5 players with 10-plus goals, Ryan Nugent-Hopkins, Zach Hyman, and Jack Roslovic. And Hyman has 10 goals in 19 games. So Calgary's leading goal scorer is Matt Coronado with 11 goals this season. You have Hyman with 10, one shy of the Flames' best goal scorer, and he's done that in 19 games. Even Nugent-Hopkins missed about 10 or so this year and has 11. Nazem Kadri leads the Flames with 31 points. Rasmus Andersson has the team's second most at 25. And so as good as Rasmus is, and it's kind of a blessing when you get a guy from the defensive pairings who can have that kind of impact in terms of points, that's awesome to have. It's just you don't want necessarily to have it be one of your top 2 or top 3 points getters. In fact, you have Calgary with 2 scorers at 10-plus goals. That's it. Matt Coronado and Blake Coleman, and neither are top 3 in points for the team. And so when you start to contrast where Calgary's at right now and all of the comments we've seen from you on Locked On Flames discussing this idea of why bother trying to push for a playoff spot where the team qualifies. Let's say Calgary gets into the postseason field. Does that first round series against whomever the Flames play feel like it did on Tuesday night, where you're playing game 1 and losing by 4 goals, play game 2, you lose by 3 goals? There's a possibility of that. I mean, Dustin Wolf is good, but he's not capable of putting aside, 35 plus shots a night. And he pretty much did that in Tuesday's game against the Oilers. So why not push for getting the best draft picks you can possibly get, right? That's the argument. And the Edmonton Oilers kind of show why that's possibly a good strategy. I mean, McDavid, the first overall pick, Nugent-Hopkins, also a first overall pick, and then you had Draisaitl, the third overall pick in those drafts from 2011 to 2015. 3 100-point seasons since for Edmonton over the course of 8 years since they had McDavid on the roster. Edmonton went 10 straight years without a playoff appearance, which has not happened in the Flames' history, right? So Calgary would have to experience unprecedented futility in order to have the story that the Edmonton Oilers have right now. And considering the Oilers have made the Stanley Cup final in the recent seasons, there's that argument you could make. I don't want to see a team have to go through what Edmonton went through for 10 straight years, missing the playoffs. That is incredibly frustrating. But right now, it feels like an inflection point for Calgary. And we'll talk more about what some of those similar drafts, not even close, with those top 3 picks in a 4-year span for the Oilers. I guess it would technically be a 5-year span up to 2015 with McDavid going first. That's not exactly what Calgary's gone to, but there's been a similar stretch that we'll recap in our next segment as we make a holiday wish list for the Calgary Flames. I'll close with one other note, just discussing the chasm between where Edmonton is and where Calgary is. The game really changed in the final few minutes of the first period into the early 5 of the second, when basically Edmonton was on a power play over that stretch of like 8 minutes. Not exactly, but it just felt like that. And the Oilers are so much better in the way that they can play because of their offensive assets in the power play situations. And that's why they're top of the league at 33% and put in a bunch against Calgary in that matchup. And the Flames power play, we've talked about it a bunch on this podcast. It is just completely weak. And if you don't have goal scorers, people who can change that and have the ability to get into the power play unit and find opportunities because you don't feel like you have to rush everything, which I guess, to be frank, Calgary doesn't necessarily rush a lot. They just don't have as many opportunities that they can create. Edmonton knows it can. And so it can be patient because something's going to develop, and we saw that on Tuesday. So it was a little bit of a train wreck, certainly at Rogers Place, and Calgary will have another chance at the Oilers coming up on Saturday, an 8 p.m. Mountain Time start from Scotiabank Saddledome. I'm wearing my Christmas sweater today. It's got a pouch with a holiday gift package right in the center of it. You can fit anything from a bottle of wine in here to maybe a holiday wish list for your Calgary Flames. We examine what, in fact, that wish list is next as this episode of Locked On Flames rolls on. Calgary loses 5-1 to Edmonton on Tuesday night on the road. The teams will play again coming up on Saturday at Scotiabank Saddledome. So you hear the sleigh bells. Santa's on his way for this Christmas Eve edition of Locked On Flames. And so what does that mean for Calgary? It means that we're going to give a holiday wish list for the Flames, something that they can hang their hat on going into Christmas and beyond, getting back from the holiday break on Saturday. And I'm going to start with goal scoring becoming more abundant. This is a wish for you, the Calgary Flames. And they made note of it on the broadcast yesterday on Sportsnet. The Flames are third in scoring over the 8-game stretch that they had prior to the Edmonton game. So things have changed dramatically. I mean, Calgary is in the bottom, beyond the bottom third in goal scoring for the season. But since they've kind of picked up a little bit of momentum, they've been one of the better teams in the entire league. And so that should be noted. I mean, Calgary can score. They certainly don't have the elite talent to have the kind of seasons that a Connor McDavid is, Macklin Celebrini, all these players, Nathan McKinnon. We've talked about many of them. We haven't seen the Avalanche since I've been in the Flames, Locked On Flames hosting chair, but still, there is that level of talent in the NHL. Calgary doesn't have any of it, but still finding a way to be third in scoring over an 8-game stretch going into Tuesday's game. And then I credited the broadcast for also pointing out that Michael Backlund, who's played 1,100 plus games for Calgary, had never had a back-to-back sequence scoring multiple goals until the 2 games prior, the Kraken and Vegas Golden Knights matchups. That's awesome for Michael. And the production that they've had out of that third line, which I'm a play-by-play guy, so I always give credit to the broadcasters when they do things well. Jack Michaels pointed that out, the fact that Calgary's third line doesn't really feel like a third line. They've been playing much better than that over the course of the Flames' last 10 plus games. And that's a big credit to Blake Coleman in so many ways, because Connor Zary, other than that 3-assist game, just feels like he is not living up to what he needs to be if Calgary is going to have production from some of their younger players. My second Calgary Flames wish list for the holidays, reach into the pouch and pull out, when a team is in a place with younger talent, Dustin Wolf is in his prime. That is my wish for the Calgary Flames, meaning you have Wolfie at 24 years old. Where will he be in his abilities in 2027, 28, 2028, 29? I think of the goalkeeper for Calgary when I was first kind of introduced into Flameshood, and that's Mika Kiprasov, who was about 28 when he was traded to Calgary. And 7 of his 8 seasons with the Flames allowed 2.7 or less goals against average. There was obviously the insane Stanley Cup final year, but I mean, Wolfie's there. Wolfie's a guy who has the ability to keep teams at 2.7 or below. And so with the Flames having only 3 sub 80-point seasons since 2002-03, you have 12 over that stretch with 80-plus points. All 3 of the sub 80-point seasons have been since 2013-14. So it's more of the recent memory over that stretch. And just 4 playoff appearances since 2008-09, though, that does kind of give you an indication of where Calgary needs to be if they have their best. It feels a little bit hyperbolic to say generational talent, but certainly young quality talent. I mean, if you look at social media on Tuesday with the Edmonton game going on, Wolfie was credited for how good he was. They talked about that side-by-side speed or side-to-side speed that Dustin Wolf has. And so if Calgary is going to say it has a generational talent on the roster right now, it certainly could be in net. So I imagine the Flames need to make some decisions, and that's my third holiday wish list item for Calgary, is to just see where you are by the end of this big road trip in mid-January. But especially after the game on Tuesday, I kind of think you make some decisions closer to where you are at the end of the homestand that starts on Saturday, 5 straight home games after or with the start of that sequence being the Battle of Alberta game against Edmonton. And I bring that up because you look at Calgary's top draft picks from that stretch in the mid-2010s, 2013 to 2016. They had Sean Monahan, who was a 6th overall pick in 2013, Matthew Tkachuk, who was picked 6th overall in 2016, and even Sam Bennett in 2014. He wasn't a huge part of arguably one of Calgary's, I mean, it isn't arguably, it is one of Calgary's best teams in that stretch that I just referenced, the last 20 years or so for Calgary, with only 3 sub 80-point seasons since 02-03. That 2018-19 team that Calgary had that scored 100-plus points, you had Sean Monahan, who was responsible for 34 goals that season, 77 points for Tkachuk, who was just in his 3rd season from being drafted in 2016. And then Sam Bennett, who's a 4th overall pick in 2014, wasn't great in the regular season for Calgary that year, but he was the team's best scorer, or best points producer rather, in the playoffs, even though Calgary had a first-round exit that year. But you look at what they did during the 2018-19 season, and Calgary had somewhat the experience that Edmonton had, almost in that same exact stretch. It's just that the Oilers were worse than Calgary, and they were picking before Calgary because of the way that they were positioned in the draft. And so the production for the Oilers coming from McDavid and Draisaitl and Nugent-Hopkins has sustained them now to be the team to beat in the Western Conference, even despite slow starts occasionally. I mean, Edmonton, they showed a graphic, I think November 10th, where they were at in the Pacific Division, now tied for first. And last year, Calgary beat them in October of 2024, and that was a winless start for Edmonton. And the Oilers find a way to bounce back. And so Calgary wasn't garbage in those years where they ended up with the 6th overall pick or the 4th overall pick. The Matthew Tkachuk selection felt like certainly a little bit more luck with the way the lottery bounced. But all of that to say, my wish for Calgary is just to be decisive by the end of the homestand and kind of know where you are and figure out exactly what direction you want to take this team going forward. So it's been a interesting couple of weeks in this chair. I'm excited to be back with you coming up on our next edition of the show. We'll get set for the Battle of Alberta rematch. This time it's going to be in Calgary. I mentioned 5 games in a row at Scotiabank Saddledome. So hopefully good things will emerge for the Calgary Flames, unlike what we saw on Tuesday against the Edmonton Oilers. Wishing you the best Christmas that you can have. And we'll see you again soon for more Locked On Flames.